Hi, I'm Heather. I'm back for another really quick video. This one particularly quick because I have to go and make dinner for my kid. And also, it's really hard keeping her not playing that ukulele for approximately 20 minutes. So I'm on like a countdown. I feel like I should start this video off with a full examination of things that don't suck in the world, just for the nature of the video. Look at this friggin' crap, guys. This is the outfit my kid's gonna wear for Roald Dahl Day. She's gonna be Fantastic Mr. Fox. That's basically the best thing that's happened to me all week. Look at this shit. Y'all, it's got a tail and a little 70s ascot. So on that note, less amazing things have also happened today. Generally in relation to various countries falling apart. As my two countries, US and UK, are slowly eating themselves from the inside out, and I'm getting pretty nervous about how I thought I had a foot in two camps, and now I'm feeling like both of my camps are festering. Getting a bit worried. I thought that I'd go for a humorous approach. Like, I needed someone to hit Brexit in the face with a fish, you know, or a pie or something. Everyone to laugh at it, and it'd just be hilarious. So I thought that this was going to be that. I finished Fintan O'Toole's Heroic Failure, Brexit and the Politics of Pain. I heard of it at Hay Festival, which I'm obsessed with, and I go to every year. I didn't get to see Fintan O'Toole at Hay Festival because I was only there for one day, but he did do a talk, and this book was in the bookstore then, like the Hay Festival tent bookstore thing, and I thought, oh, I'll just get that then, shall I? And I thought it was going to be like ha 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 funny, but really it was more like, you know what's funny? Everything sucks. Isn't that funny? You know? And then you're like, okay, yeah, that is sort of funny, yeah. That is sort of funny. Like, it's that kind of funny. Like, super dry. Not sure I'll talk about how we're all fucked, sort of funny. It took me a bit of time to get into it. My first thoughts that I sort of wrote down about the book are, holy shit, this is so boring. But I'm glad I'm stuck with it because it did sort of get better in the end. I think really all expats from other places living in Britain should read this book because I feel like I learned a crap ton about England primarily, but the UK pretty much in general, more so than I've learned living in this country for 10 years. Now that I know the things that I know about it, like, I mean, obviously, Fintan O'Toole is not like, you know, an omnipotent being. You know, things that he says aren't like the word, you know, it's obviously an opinion. It can be countered, people can disagree with him. But, like, knowing that, now I see instances and like examples of things that he has said about the psyche of the UK. Just in everything. Like trips to Tesco, people on the bus. I see it everywhere. Enlightening as fuck. Also, hugely depressing. He sort of talks about how it is primarily England that sort of Brexit is part of. It sort of grows from primarily England and English people and everything and English history. But he does mention a bit about sort of Scotland and Wales, and he sort of talks about the different kinds of nationalism, which I'm not sure I really buy. He's on about like sort of imperialistic nationalism, looking to sort of take over things, and like anti-imperialistic nationalism, sort of looking to overthrow things. And my husband's like really sort of like a bit of a Welsh nationalist, a bit, like not the scary kind, just like pro, you know, wanting more direct rule in Wales, you know, and wanting sort of protection for Welsh culture and things. He sort of says a lot of things and I'm like, I'm not sure I like how nationalist that sounds. But obviously Fintan O'Toole is in the camp of, well, there is good kinds of nationalism. And I guess I can see where he's coming from, but I'm not sure I buy it. But basically, sort of the premise behind that with the nationalism is that he thinks England is trying to be both. Thinks they're trying to be both the good kind of nationalism and the bad kind of nationalism, and all it does is just end in a bit of sad self-pity that doesn't go anywhere and just harms everybody. He sort of breaks it down into a couple things, like he compares it to sort of like 50 Shades of Grey. England's like the one that wants to be whipped, or he sort of like talks about the scene where like the girl and like the like dominant guy or whatever are like having a conversation about what the terms are of the dominant sex. So he also sort of talks about like this other book called SSGB. I've never actually read that book, but I've read some other books that he mentions that are like it, like Dominion and Fatherland, like books written after the war that sort of like exist in a fictional sort of like alternate universe where Germany and the Axis powers won the war. the UK and England and everything is being sort of controlled by Germany. And he sort of frames how quite a lot of people who voted to leave the European Union sort of see the world and how they see Germany and how they see Europe. And obviously, I'm quite young. I am so far removed from the war. It's good, I think, for me to sort of like hear this accounting of how older people who were closer to the war see Europe and why, you know. So they're like, oh, we're not going to take anything from Germany, we're not going to take their crap, we're not going to be run by them, you know, we defeated them in war and we should just stomp on them because they ruined everything, and they're dangerous and they're always trying to take things over, you know. And even if they don't think that about German people actively, and they like, you know, like the German government now, and they like the German people now, blah, 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 they still have this in their mind that allowing Germany to have like a really strong say in what the UK does and how the UK spends its money and what the UK's laws are like a sort of a re-losing of the war, like a sort of doing the war over but not winning this time. And they sort of see the young people as not grasping that. So like in SSGB, the young people work with the Nazis. They're like, come on, you know, they're doing good work, you know, they're functioning properly, you know, what's the problem? And the older people who like lived through the war, they're like, I can't believe you are thinking like this, like, I can't believe that you're accepting that the Nazis have just taken over our country now and they're just running it and you have no pride and what are you, not British, blah, blah, and they're angry. And it's sort of like that, how they see it now with like the European Union. Like, ever since I read a book a while ago about how democracies die or whatever, where like democracies are eating themselves from the inside out by people refusing to see other sides. So I'm trying to see things from other people's point of view so that we don't just like eat each other to death and then collapse. That's sort of helping me to see it. Like, I feel like that was a really good thing that came out of me reading this book. I think it's helping me in like my American version of things as well, like trying to think how older people in America, like, you know, people I know who voted for Donald Trump or whatever, like, it's helping me to see it. He also talks about something really interesting that I never really thought about before, but now that I'm thinking about it, now that I've heard his account of it, I see it in everything. How sort of like legends from the UK or like England specifically really raise up like the failures. He's on about like the HMS Terra or something, like a failed mission to Antarctica or whatever, and how the guy, you know, bravely and stoically knew that they were all going to die, so he just walked out into the winter to die, you know, without turning back and without saying anything to anyone, and how brave, you know, blah, blah, blah. When really we should be celebrating, like, the successes of things and being like, oh, they failed, that's really sad, instead of being like, yeah, you failed like a man, ugh, you know, and, like, he's saying sort of this tendency to, like, idealize and sort of immortalize defeats, retreats, and failures is sort of basically due to the sort of intensity of English dominance over everything for so long. It's like a symptom of that, like a sort of inner guilt, or like when you have too much of one thing for too long, you sort of get desensitized to it and want something else. It's like a symptom of too much power. And like in this part, he says something like really interesting. He said like the far right is the white man's Me Too movement. He says like victimhood is where the power is, and England like knows where the power is, like they know where to get the power, and so they're seeing themselves quite often as a victim. So they're like, you know, they're being invaded by immigrants, they're victim of like over immigranting. And I thought that was really interesting. Can you hear my kid playing the ukulele downstairs? Yeah, you can definitely hear that. Okay. And like another part, he talks about sort of food and sort of like European laws about what the UK can and cannot sell, like food-wise, and why it's such a huge deal. Like, it's a huge sticking point. Loads of people who say they voted out, like they'll say, oh, how dare, you know, Europe say what kind of food we can and can't have. And he's sort of saying that this is part of like this psyche where trivial things are taken really seriously, and really serious things are sort of trivialized. And I sort of look around and see that quite a lot as well, and I can sort of I can sort of see it, but also like in this section, the things that stuck with me most weren't anything about like the main point. And like he talks about a speech by Boris Johnson to a bunch of like rich people in a room, where he tells like a really funny story about how he ate his wife's toast when she'd just had a baby, and then he had to go and get more toast but couldn't get more toast. And how dare the NHS not have like something set up for him, a person who has money and wants things, to buy more toast, and how that is supposed to be like a way to say that the NHS should allow for more privatization. What a hideous story. That's not funny. It's not a funny story. He's obviously just telling it to people, like the only 4 guys in a room who are going to think it's funny. The people who have money, like more money than God, and really would like some more toast. Yes, we'd like to throw away everything that's good about the NHS so that we also can get more toast. Friend, we've been there, eating our wife's toast and needing to get more. Disgusting. I'm disgusted by the toast story. Also, like, another part of this chapter, like, not the point of the chapter at all, was like manipulation by the campaigns. How people sort of think a certain thing naturally, whatever, but how when there's an election of any kind and people want others to vote in a certain way, the kind of master manipulation that happens, things that flood secretly into the world, messages that you sort of absorb without even thinking about it, that play so masterfully to things that you haven't thought about for 30 years. Like, who even has a choice anymore? Who has the ability to make their own decisions? Who, like, knows that the things that I think aren't just, like, master manipulations by a guy who wants me to think that way? I watched this show on Netflix with my husband about the Cambridge Analytica people, sort of all of the data that they got and all of the data that they disseminated into the world secretly, and how they just basically engineered consent for all of these things throughout the world, for elections throughout the world, like presidents and campaigns. And I'm, like, terrified and disgusted, but also super impressed. But mainly terrified and disgusted. I think sort of the main part that really resonated with me and really sort of stuck with me is the parts that he talks about sort of nationalism and sovereignty. Like, I'm American by birth. I spent my first, 20 years or whatever in America. Like, I'll always be mainly American, no matter how long I live in the UK. And sovereignty is a huge, huge, huge deal in America. Like, our whole like beginnings were throwing off kings and all this sort of lofty greatness, and we're like super individualist. So not just sovereignty in our government, but in ourselves. Like, don't touch me, don't touch my stuff, don't touch my family, I will do for me, don't touch me. I think that that's so ingrained in American culture that I'll always sort of feel that will always sort of resonate with me a little bit. What? You want them, do you?
I know, but not yucky ones. I want different ones.
What do you mean you want different ones?
Are those nice for me?
Well, they're just the original ones.
And
It's not like the beef kind like Daddy likes, it's just the normal kind. Yeah? Okay, well, I guess you can have them then. If you promise to go away for 5 more minutes. Yeah? Okay, deal. Anyway. Like, this nationalism and sort of this obsession with sovereignty, it's sort of a deep feeling culturally that sovereignty is really important no matter what, is obviously a huge part of this Brexit thing. And I think it's the most obvious part of Brexit, but it's not really a part that people talk about much. People talk about loads about food, and about immigrants, but the most obvious thing, that people feel that the European Union infringes on, this natural right to sovereignty, isn't really discussed as much, and I think it's the only one to me that would ever really make huge amounts of sense. In the book, he talks quite a lot about, like, how statistically people in England who see themselves more as English than as British were more likely to have voted for Brexit. And it's sort of, obviously, Scotland didn't vote really for Brexit at all. Like, the numbers in Scotland were quite low comparatively. And in Wales, more people in Wales voted for Brexit than against it. But when you look in the particularly Welsh culture areas, sort of like primarily Welsh speaking and things like that, they did vote hugely against Brexit. So it is sort of like tied in together with sort of like an English nationalism specifically. And he sort of talks about the trend toward more of that. It used to be that everyone in England was like, no, British, 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 and people used the word English as a synonym for British. But nowadays, you get quite a lot of people in England saying, well, we should have our own parliament. Things that affect only England, only English people should vote on it, just like they have devolution in Wales or in Scotland. And actually, when you ask people in Wales and Scotland and Northern Ireland how they feel about a particularly English parliament, they're sort of generally for it. They're like, fine, yeah, give us all of our rights back and you can just get on with whatever you want to do that doesn't affect us, like we don't even care. Sort of the rise in that sort of devolution, sort of setting off this idea in England as well that particularly wasn't as strong before, has really led to this idea that, you know, nationalism, a drive for sovereignty pushing Brexit. Can we have a quick discussion about how scary the Rees-Mogg family is? Like, apparently Jacob Rees-Mogg's dad, like, subscribed to this idea that there will one day be a world without nation states, where, like, nation states are extinct, and the people who have all the power are just single people who have all the money, like a world beyond collective nation states, and just, like, with all of the power in the reach of people with all the money. And he was like actively pushing toward this sort of idea and this belief that that will eventually be the way things are, and he wanted to be one of the people. Like, I mean, like, when you think about that, Jacob Rees-Mogg does not seem, you know, so bad, you know. But dear God, like, are these like the people that are running things? Because obviously that's where we went wrong. Like, not the last couple steps, but like steps like all the way back to when people like this were born and put in power. That's like probably hundreds of years. We need to go all the way back to that and like start over, basically, is what kind of file we're working on. And then he like ends it on like a sort of golden ending, really, where he's like the extreme wealth gap or whatever is like incompatible with democracy and has a huge hand in what has happened to this. And will continue to have a hand in everything that comes after this. Like, the wealth gap in the UK is like the largest in the developed sort of Western world or whatever, other than America, because we're the king. That's right. Like the king of shame. Everything shameful, we're the king of. And ain't nothing you girls can do about it. That's incredible that it's, you know, I think my husband yesterday was saying something like it's double that of Germany. So like the wealth gap, like the difference between the rich and the poor in Germany is like half of what it is in the UK generally. And that's disgraceful. And I can say that because I'm American and it's even worse where I'm from. So that was like a bit of like a rambling roundabout talk about crap, and I'm really sorry. But basically, to sum up, this was actually really super interesting and a bit sad, because obviously the subject matter is sad, especially now when it's just sort of kicking off. But I thought it sort of, you know, had like a funny spin on it, and also had really good insights into sort of why people voted for Brexit, just in case you're sort of like me and you have a bit of a hard time like grasping why one would. I think I have like more of a ground to see other people's sides now, generally. Really regretting giving the baby my hula hoops now because I'm like really hungry, so I need to go and make some dinner. If you like this video, give it a like, subscribe to my channel, please. If you have anything to say about the video, I welcome all comments. Like, I probably wouldn't be so welcoming towards comments like that are of an angry nature, just in case you have really angry things to say about the video. But I'm 100% for any opinions expressed in a polite way, even opinions that I generally like wouldn't agree with. Like now after reading this book that I said about, actually I did a video about it, about How Democracies Die, this book that's really like changed my life, I think. And I'll link it down below just in case you're interested in getting that book. But it sort of made a hugely persuasive argument about how democracies are killing themselves by not trying to see other sides of an argument, and just sort of seeing political opponents not as just opponents in a game, but as enemies, Not as people who are just as patriotic as you and want just as much of good things for the country as you do, but for people who are trying to destroy everything you love and like everything that is important in your life, you know? So if you have something to say that is like a different opinion than what I would believe myself, I'm 100% for it. Please, 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 please give me all of that. I studied like politics and debate in uni, so I promise to be civil. I'm a very good debater. So also if you have something to say that's really like along the lines of something I would say, I'm definitely 100% up for a bit of echo chamber indulgence. I quite like to sort of echo chamber off people who think exactly the same things I like, just like everyone on the planet, which is basically a problem, but I still love it and we should just do it. If you read this book and you liked it or you didn't like it, give me your thoughts. Okay, thank you. Bye.